This is the first of 3 lessons on breath units and nuclear emphasis, terms you may not have heard before. Horace has been bleaching his hair. We read this to one another in class and discovered that, with no other context, most of us hear the word hair emphasized. When we read English, we hear the word with the last stressed syllable in each sentence emphasized, and in that sentence, it's hair. That's not always the case when we speak to one another. Depending on the context, we hear different words emphasized. For instance, if I ask, "Has Jose been bleaching his hair?" someone might respond, "Horace has been bleaching his hair," as opposed to Jose. So we discovered this in class by preparing and performing 2-line skits. In each group, we wrote a first line of a dialogue that would cause the second person to emphasize that group's assigned word when he or she responds with a sentence at left. Horace has been bleaching his hair. For instance, has Horace been dyeing his hair? Horace has been bleaching his hair. Did Horace just start bleaching his hair? Horace has been bleaching his hair. Has Horace been bleaching Nadine's hair? Horace has been bleaching his hair, and so on. So context gives us a great deal of information about which word to emphasize. But without context, which is normally the case we're in when we read, it's the last stressed syllable. And that's good to know. The English language isn't quite as flexible when you write. On the other hand, knowing where it's not so flexible can give us great power. We're learning how to emphasize different things in our sentences, and we can learn from the human voice. Nuclear emphasis is one means. Writers emphasize by many means, including repetition, rhythm, and nuclear emphasis. We're going to look at nuclear emphasis today. Nuclear emphasis is the emphasis we give to the word with the last stressed syllable in each part of a sentence and in the sentence as a whole. What are these sentence parts that contain nuclear emphasis? Well, they're called breath units. What's a breath unit? Well, a breath unit is the text between 2 punctuation marks. Not just any punctuation marks, syntactical punctuation marks. Syntactical ones don't include quotation marks, apostrophes, but they do include punctuation marks that group words, like commas, dashes, parentheses, semicolons, colons, periods. So, if a sentence were a Monopoly board, where would we find Pennsylvania Avenue, or for that matter, Boardwalk? A bit of an analogy there. Well, in a Monopoly board, you can see there are colored monopolies. For instance, one color is purple. You have St. Charles, States, and Virginia Avenues. The most expensive property in that monopoly is the last one. It's, in that case, Virginia Avenue. You get more money when someone lands on that if it's your property. Same with all the other monopolies. Well, in a sentence, a breath unit might be said to be a monopoly like that, and it's separated by the railroads and the corner spaces, things like free parking and go to jail. Those are like punctuation marks, and they separate the monopolies. So that's how a sentence is like a monopoly board. Just to break it down again, the last stressed syllable in a breath unit is the top real estate in a given monopoly. That's the analogy. And so the last stressed syllable in the entire sentence would be boardwalk. That property is the most expensive on the board. Take the top sentence, for instance. Here it is. In green is the last stressed syllable, the nuclear emphasis of each monopoly, so to speak, or we're calling them breath units. And in blue is the last stressed syllable for the entire sentence. So the first breath unit, from the beginning of the sentence to the first comma, if a sentence were a monopoly board, we hear the NOP sound as the loudest. Now, you may hear board, and that's fine. This is never going to be a test on which is the last stressed syllable. So the idea, though, is to use this to your advantage, as we'll see. And boardwalk, the word boardwalk, the last stressed syllable in the entire sentence is board from boardwalk, which gives that word extra prominence. So, now that we know that the last stressed syllable gets a lot of emphasis, we realize that's valuable real estate, and we're going to put things there that are most important. I live on northern Puget Sound in Washington State alone. A blast from the past. This is the first line from the first essay that we read this year, from Annie Dillard's The Death of a Moth. Well, she's using this same nuclear emphasis. She has sound, state, and lone from alone. She, as you see, is using nuclear emphasis to begin to build a theme about loneliness in writers. And she does that, we already saw earlier this year, by making the word all alone, putting it by itself. But now we know she's also involving herself in nuclear emphasis by taking that word where it would normally go, after the word live, and sticking that word alone at the end of the sentence as its own breath unit, and making it the nuclear emphasis for the entire sentence, making it the boardwalk for that sentence, the word with the most at the place of the most important real estate in the entire sentence. Well, she's beginning to build a theme because we know that the second paragraph in her essay begins with this now famous sentence, and the nuclear emphasis there falls on company for the entire sentence. So company, alone, she's got words that are associated with her theme of writers needing to give their lives away in loneliness in order sometimes to benefit readers. So, why does this happen, by the way, in the English language? Why does the last stressed syllable, why is that in writing, the nuclear emphasis? Well, I think it's largely because of chain sentences. When we speak, we normally want to connect our readers in each sentence with something that came before, and that's kind of boring, but it makes for good comprehension. But toward the end of the sentence, we have new information, and we want to emphasize that. So the English language normally has us emphasize that last stressed syllable. Now let's use it to our advantage. Let's say that your electrician came over and charged you $95 for simply resetting a circuit breaker, and you felt a great deal of outrage. Well, the way it's written here is one way to do it, but let's restructure it to emphasize how outraged we are. If we did that, we'd take the word outrageous in its measly position toward the beginning of the sentence, and we put it at the end. For you to charge $95 for simply resetting a circuit breaker is outrageous. Same with this one. Let's say this employee wanted to impress his boss, Mr. Korn, about how sympathetic he was about the boss's dog's death. Well, ending it with lucky is sweet, but it's not getting the job done. He wants to, he's kind of wants to ingratiate himself with his boss. So to be obsequious, he wants to emphasize his sympathy. So we might reword it something like, Mr. Korn, I, on the occasion of the death of your little dog Lucky, offer my deepest sympathy, or something like that, so that sympathy comes out to be the last word. So there, on a kind of a small level, is working words into that boardwalk, that top real estate, to emphasize. Here we have form following function. We have syntax following semantics. Semantics being the meaning of things. Well, the syntax can mirror that and emphasize it. And then we got on understanding style and did the exercises on page 122. So our exit slip was to answer the question, how are breath units and nuclear emphasis pictured by a Monopoly board? That's the first of 3 lessons on breath units and nuclear emphasis.